Hi, this is Sean from Eve's Temptations Royal Pythons and Eve's Temptations Creations. I chose to sponsor That Wolfie Royals podcast because I believe the hobby needs things like this to bring us together and to showcase all the talent in the hobby, old and new. I am a hobbyist Royal Python breeder specialising in double and multi-recessive projects. Check out Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date, Morph Market for available animals, and feel free to message or catch me at a show for a chat. In early 2021, I set up Eve's Temptations Creations initially to print my own snake bags, and it grew massively from there. I print t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, key rings, glass, photo boards, and much more. This is merch printing for the breeders, by the breeders. Unlike the big companies, I will only print it if it will look good, so I can check your logo files and can alter for free, so there's no nasty surprises when your stuff arrives. I can also do gifts for the family, like photo slates, mugs, and baby grows for all occasions like Mother's Day, Father's Day, and anniversaries. Podcast listeners can ask for the podcast bundle, a t-shirt, mug, and keyring package at a discount, which can be for your own logo, podcast logo, or a mix of both. Find both pages on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Eve's Temptations Royal Pythons and Eve's Temptations Creations, and keep listening to the podcast for limited special offers throughout the year. Thanks for listening.
Hi there, this is Scott from Scott Wilkinson Reptiles. I'm pleased to support That Wolfie Royals podcast. It's absolutely fantastic to have a UK-based podcast, and Tom's slowly starting to get the hang of this. So, for those that don't know me, I've been breeding reptiles now for over 35 years and have focused on breeding ball python morphs for the last 20 years. I'm also working with probably the largest collection of Australian blue-tongued skinks in Europe, including albinos and melanistics. I also have been importing and exporting reptiles for over 25 years now and currently offer that service for other breeders and collectors, and can ship your animals in and out of Europe, USA and Canada. Best place to find me is on Instagram or YouTube, or if you're really unlucky, you'll see me half naked at a reptile show somewhere around the world. Message me via Instagram for any further details, and enjoy this amazing podcast. Take care.
Hi, this is Darren from Wild Rex. We've decided to sponsor That Wolfie Royals podcast for the second year running, as he done so well last year. So if you're in the market for a custom made rack in any colour you want, with any colour tubs you want, check us out on Instagram and Facebook. Back to the podcast.
Right, we are recording. So thanks very much, Justin, for coming on. I know you're a busy man, so I do appreciate your time.
Awesome. Yeah, it's good to be here. Awesome. This is my first time on your podcast. So
absolutely. Hopefully not the last, but I've got to leave a good impression now, though.
Yeah.
So we'll just start with a little brief introduction of basically how you got started, taking it back to the beginning. If you want to give us a brief rundown of basically where the journey started for you and the who, what, when, and why, basically.
Well, I was born in 1981. No, we won't go that far back. But no, I just love reptiles as a kid. Like most people in this business, just loved catching them in the wild, love herping and everything like that. It was always like my favorite pastimes. I always want to go hiking, but I never wanted to hike anywhere. I just wanted to look over, flip every rock on a hillside until I found some snakes. That was always my happy place. Then I got into high school and I started, keeping a little bit, mostly local species, whatever I could find. And in college, I got my first captive bred stuff, which was some Sinaloan milk snakes.
Okay.
And started breeding those a little bit in college. And of course, I'd spent a year in Africa at this point. So I was like, I'd seen some ball pythons in the wild, but to me, they were just kind of like the boring pythons, I never thought anything of them, never thought it'd be a career. And in college, started doing the Sinaloan milk snakes and just really enjoying them, really enjoying the process of creation. And we started finding out about all these amazing ball python morphs. I started watching Ralph Davis, especially. He's like my guy back in the day. Just was so inspired by him. And the more I saw, the more I was like, if I'm going to breed snakes, it needs to be something that actually has all these different mutations. It brought a different aspect of it in, the collecting aspect, the organization, the planning. That was all really rounded out the hobby for me in a way that like hit on several different parts of my personality to really enjoy it.
Awesome. So how long did it take for you to go from sort of just noticing that the ball pythons was what you wanted to do to scaling it into something bigger and eventually forging a career out of it?
It was a really slow journey. There's a much faster way to do this than I did. I was just very consistent over a really long period of time. When I graduated college, my uncle invested a little bit of money into some animals for me. I was working for him at a time. I was managing a medical surgery practice, and he was like, you love these snakes. I'm like, please, can will you invest in one piebald or one clown? And it was back when there was no combos at all. Maybe a bumblebee is about being made around then. And I was just so excited about it all that I got him to invest a little bit, but it's only about $75,000 total that he was ever invested. And we have never spent any money outside of reinvesting since then. So compared to what some people, invest nowadays, it was just a tiny little bit, but we just did it over such a long period of time of constantly reinvesting, constantly making new stuff, holding back stuff, and having a decent eye for combinations of where we want to go, what areas we don't want to go in, and making good decisions. 20 years, 20 years of runway, you can go a long ways. Yeah, right. So it was a slow burn, from the beginning. And again, there's much faster ways of doing it with more investment and taking it more seriously early on. But for me, I wasn't sure that it was going to be a career probably for the first 5, 6, 7 years is when I was like, oh, it's a fun little hobby. It's like, oh, it's a little bit of side income. And I was like, I can't keep growing this and doing my job. And then when I quit my job, that's when I started taking it seriously like a career.
At what point did you identify that it was capable of being a career? Was it when the side money was coming in that was matching or was greater than the day-to-day?
Yeah, it was around that time. I always knew it could be a career, and I always thought it'd be great if it was. But I was never sure that if it was in the cards for me. For me, it was a hobby, and I was excited about it, and I wanted to make some extra money, but I was really more about my interest. And I think that is a little bit of a superpower when you're so interested in something that it doesn't have to perform for you to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of years of kind of setbacks and small gains where it's not really clear that it's going to work out. And most people, if they have a big financial burden, or if they're doing it for the career, they're looking for all those indicators that it's not going to work out as maybe a chance to bail. Right.
Yeah.
For me, bailing was never an option because I wasn't missing goals. Like I had no goals except for to enjoy it. Right.
Yeah.
And then they came to a point where, again, the money was almost the same as my day job. And I was like, man, I enjoy doing this so much more. Right. I really enjoy doing the snakes. So if I can quit my job and just do the snakes, at least I'll be making the same amount of money. Again, I wasn't thinking these huge aspirations of what it's become now. I had no idea that the industry might not even last very long because everybody was always saying that, this ball python thing's over. The same thing they're saying now. They've always said that. And in the back of my mind, I said, I think it's a good industry, but I don't know that they're not right. I'm sure there's some unforeseen things that maybe it's going to all fall apart. But for now, I'd rather be doing this than my job. So I'm going to do this. And then whatever I do, I just try to do it as well as possible. And it just grows.
So what sort of difficulties and sort of trials did you face in that period where you was changing over? Was there anything that was potentially going to be a setback that you had to overcome?
Yeah, we had a couple of big ones that I remember really easily on because they were so devastating at the time. One was I quit my job because I had a large shipment to the United Kingdom. In fact, that was going to be, it was a significant amount of money. It's probably going to be like a 6-month runway for me to say like, well, I have about 6 months of expenses in the bank. If for some reason the job thing doesn't work out, I can always go back and beg after 6 months. Right. So, but just having that buffer is what gave me the confidence to go in and say, I'm quitting. But then that deal was all done, but then I quit my job and then I shipped the snakes to Dave, and I think half of them died on the shipment. And it was just my 6-month runway became a 3-month runway real fast.
So you had to perform
and
real
suddenly
quickly.
I was like, oh no, this is not what I thought it was. It's going to be much harder than I thought potentially. That was one big setback. But we worked through it, customers were taken care of, and I thankfully didn't run out of money. So worked out. But then the other thing was I was the second person in the world to make a dreamsicle.
Yeah.
After, of course, Ralph Davis. And I was very fortunate. My first one was a male. And so I was able to kind of put him to work pretty fast. I had one really good season out of him. And then he got respiratory and died. And it was so painful on a couple levels. On a personal level, he was the most special snake I'd ever made by a long shot. And it was such a milestone. And just to lose him, so painful. And of course, the other thing was that he was probably the biggest income earner of the facility. And so that was just, I almost wanted to hang it up at that point and say like, I'm done. This is over. and yeah, I think all you could do is just push through those times and realize that there's highs and lows, and the highs will come again.
Absolutely. So moving on from there into where sort of Kinova is now, at what point did you realize that this was going big scale, and that you'd need help along the way, and that you weren't going to be able to do it all on your own anymore?
I don't know. I don't think I ever had that realization, to be honest with you, and not on the scale. I mean, even now, I don't think of it as big scale.
Yeah.
I think that's just partially a mentality.
Sure.
I always tend to focus on, hey, what are the challenges I have? I don't, and it's a negative too, because I don't get to appreciate success very well. But I don't sit back and think about, oh man, this is amazing. Look how far we've come. Very often. But there did come a point where we started getting someone to help with the rats a little bit. I think my first help was 4 hours a week. One afternoon the guy would come in and help me clean the rats. And it was quite a while, I think, until I actually had a first person that was at least half time. I can't remember what year it was, but that was my wife encouraging me, because again, I had this mentality of, it's going to be only as big as whatever I can do. And because I'm just kind of a control freak and I want everything perfect. And it's really hard to bring somebody in and know they might muck it up a little bit, right?
Sure.
Especially when the value of these snakes. If one animal dies, that's their salary for a year potentially, or just the cost is so high. So trusting people is a tough process that took me years to get through. We finally had our first full-time employee, and we went through a few of them because we had to find somebody who was decent, right? Who was going to last long term. And eventually we got Chase, and Chase became my first full-time guy that was made the cut essentially. And partly it's finding good people, and partly it's learning how to bring somebody in and set them up not to fail, right? As a boss, it's easy to say, this guy's a good employee, this guy's a bad employee, this girl's a good employee, whatever. But there's just so much of it, honestly, is if you're setting them up for success initially. And that you have to learn that the hard way and say, not every problem that happens is the employee's fault. It's like, how do you take that on as an employer and be better?
So how important is the team aspect of, obviously you got Summer, Chase, Rob there as well now?
It's huge.
Like how easy does that make your job now compared to what it was before?
I wouldn't say my job is easier. It's still full time for the most part, but I do have the ability to stop and move away and do something else. The animals are I always say it's a rat race. It's a snake race. Like you're on a treadmill of repeating systems over and over and over again, because animal care never stops. They're not like a product where you'd be like, oh, we have 150 extra of this product on the shelf this week. Or like, let it sit there. Who cares? These animals, they degrade if you don't take good care of them. You can't ever just take a pause and say, we're not doing this week, and no big deal. even if you get to the point where you say, like, I don't need income from these, well, they're still lives and you still have to take care of them. Like, at no point can this process end without selling them all. So, it's having the help allows you to every so often take a break and say, I'm gonna let someone else cover this. And I'm gonna step off the treadmill just for a few days, a week or whatever, and say, I can have a vacation. And I had to go right back to it and never stop again for a while. But having the team aspect allows you to cover everything, have another layer of coverage, and also it allows you to actually just accomplish a lot more. We could not have as many clutches, as many snakes, as many babies if it was just one person, doing it. And the last thing is, everybody has their ability to do something that's, very unique and special. And I was always, as an entrepreneur, I think most people who are business owners in this business are really good at a lot of things, because you have to be, especially early on. You have to just be able to be decent at most things. But it's real easy for you to get that mentality that you were the best at everything. And that's absolutely not the case. So people come in, like Summer was a huge for me, because she was able to come in and do a lot of the marketing and video stuff that I had very little time for. And she was actually better at it, and Chase is better at doing certain aspects of the snake keeping than I am. And I'm better at the strategic, and everybody can focus on what they're best at. Then the whole thing is much stronger.
Sure. So all like well-oiled machine, basically, and everyone's got their part to play.
Right. Yeah.
So something you said earlier was like, you're not great at sort of recognizing your own success, etc. At what point did you realize that you were the guy at the top of the industry, the one that was sort of leading the way? Or have you even?
About 6 years ago, I remember that moment. It's funny, I remember the moment precisely, and it's unusual for me. But I was in my snake room about 6 years ago, approximately. And I didn't realize I was at the top necessarily, but the realization for me was I was in my snake room, and I think I was just feeding or something. And suddenly the thought occurred to me, because you got to realize, like in a vacuum, it's probably easy to think that things have always come in the way they are. But no, I mean, I started literally as nobody, buying a couple snakes, just like everyone else who buys a couple snakes in this business. It's exactly the same. To just starting to make a few cool combos. And I was always a little guy looking up to the big guys ever since Ralph Davis, and there was around 6 years ago that I was in my snake room feeding. And I suddenly had this realization, like, I wouldn't trade my animals for anyone else's animals in the whole business.
Okay.
And even though I have massive respect for so many of these big entrepreneurs and people who've gone before, and Dave Tracy and Pete Call and Brian Barczyk and all these people who made what we do possible, Nerd. I suddenly realized that, although I have utmost respect for them, I would not trade my collection for theirs. And that made me realize, like, hey, we've reached a new spot here where literally we're making things that are, they're consequential. We just made the Batman, I think, or a little past, just a little bit past that point. We'd never made a Pompeii or anything at that point. And I just realized, like, we're on some stuff that it will lead to more cutting edge stuff than we currently have. I'm going to pause here. I lost your video feed. Yeah, there you go.
Yep, they're back. Cool. That's fine. So on the sort of the subject of cutting edge animals and morphs that you were creating, how do you work out what you're going to do pairing wise to create those new cutting edge morphs that are coming out? So you mentioned like the Batman there, obviously the Pompeis, things like that. What is it that you're looking for in certain combos and certain traits that let you have that vision to put those animals together to try and create something like the Pompeii?
Honestly, people would love to give me a lot of credit, but I don't think I can take a lot of credit for that. It's a weird combination, but I think so much of what I do feels like the only thing I could have done.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's two aspects. One is sometimes I'll think of an animal well in advance, and I'll think that's a cool combo. I need to make that. You know, like the Batman was one of those. Um, but for the most part, almost all the best stuff has been made by seeing what I have and thinking, if I was going to add something to this, which one might make it better? And then I'll think, okay, there's three options. Of those three, I think which one's I think the most likely to make it better. Okay, this one probably, and I'll do that one. It's not like I can foresee
Yeah, of course.
exactly what it's going to look like or anything. And then when it comes down to when you're doing pairings, usually you're kind of constrained. Like, okay, so this is a het hypo, het clown, and I only have three males to put to it, and this one's yellow belly and this one's yellow belly, so I can't do that one. You end up with one option, and people are like, "Wow, Jesse's a genius!" Like, I had one option. This is the only pair that I could have made in the whole collection that would have been. I was just essentially eliminating bad choices. I had one option left, so I would say the vast majority of what I make is from narrowing the options and then choosing the best one. And maybe
Sure.
I'm better at choosing the best one than most, but maybe not by a lot.
Yeah, maybe you've got the keener eye for detail for it now.
Yeah.
Has there been anything over the years where you've paired for something that you thought would look amazing that's gone the other way? It's sort of not turned out as expected and not as good as expected?
I don't have a lot of memory of that. Usually I probably block it out, but I would just say that honestly, I think the Confusion Batman, if I'm thinking right, the Confusion, I was really excited about it and it looked amazing. The Confusion Leprechaun looked great. The Confusion Spot Nose Clown looked great. And the Confusion Batman, I was sure was going to be the next crazy thing. And it ended up being so reduced pattern, with just a little bit of spots on it and kind of brown. I'm like, I went too far. I would say most problem combos come from just going too far. And you say like you added one too many bright genes or one too many disrupting genes, and you've now wiped your palette and it looks like bleh, So that does happen sometimes.
Yeah, I like to call those the bowls of soup. You know that all the ingredients are good. They just don't blend that well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you got to think which one is the one I need to pull out of here. And that's why, like these days, I feel like the industry is going more towards utilizing these really subtle genes, because you can put a lot of subtle genes into something and end up with a really cool result, and keep adding things without it, blowing out and looking weird and looking bad.
Absolutely. So one thing that sort of will be fresh on people's minds still, because it was only a couple of years ago, was the rebrand to Kinova. How difficult a decision was that for you, changing from JKR to Kinova? Was it something that had been in the pipeline for a while, or was it something that you'd always wanted to do eventually?
No, it kind of the idea kicked in. We did the change about 2.5 years ago, and the idea kicked in probably about 4 years ago. As became more and more of a team effort here, I started feeling, I kind of felt two ways. One was I wanted everybody to feel like they were part of something and not just working for a guy, like they were part of something. I feel like a name change would take it away from, Jacob Belka Reptiles as this one guy versus the whole thing. The other thing is 20 years in, you start to think about potentially an exit strategy. And although I'm not looking to exit, I begin to kind of feel like when I exit, if I exit, it will be much better to sell the business where the name doesn't become obsolete the day you sell.
Okay.
And it would just make it that much more valuable. And knowing that that day might someday come, I thought it's only going to, as the profile of Jacob Belka Reptiles gets bigger and bigger and bigger, that transition will be harder and harder every single year. The better thing to do it is do it as soon as possible and rip that Band-Aid off, get everybody used to Kinova. And then if that day someday comes where we do want to sell, it'll just be normal. It won't feel like we got to make a change at the very last second to try to make it palatable.
Did you have any doubts over the rebrand as to how it would be received?
Yes.
By?
Totally. We're kind of under a microscope, and every year that's even more and more the case, because we've gotten to a place where we're like an institution and not just a breeder anymore. It feels like that. So, I mean, there was a little bit of pushback. It's weird. in a way, like, who cares what business is called, right? I mean, you can't imagine that the Thai restaurant down the street changes its name, then people are going to get upset about it and feel personally attacked, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but this is a very interesting business. It's a very unique business because um, everybody, for the most part, the business is made up of relatively unprofessional breeders. And I don't say unprofessional in the sense of they act unprofessional. I just mean they're people who don't necessarily have experience owning other businesses prior to this. And so I think and it's very, very compact, and we sell to a lot of each other, and we have a lot of the same customers, and so many of the people we do sell to end up becoming new businesses, which we're now end up competing with just naturally. It's a very interesting dynamic in this business, and it did ruffle some feathers. But what I knew early on was if we had started with Kinova and then tried to change to Jacob Buck Reptiles, people would have hated that too. So it really wasn't the name, it was the change, right? And I felt like the change had to happen and people would get over it, and they have. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think Canova is a great name for it as well. I think it's a very fitting name. It doesn't, as crazy as it sounds, like you almost forget it was Jacob Buck Reptiles 2-3 years ago.
Right. It was a lot easier to say. It's a lot easier to read, And in a way, I think that does help with the marketing side. It makes everything a little bit easier on the marketing side when people know how to say your name.
Absolutely. So something you touched on there as well was like an exit strategy. Do you have something in mind? Do you know what your time span left in this is?
I don't. I'm still enjoying it. I'm not looking to get out or anything. But just thinking about it theoretically, I think it'd be pretty hard to find an exit strategy. I think that the scale of this business, the scale of the value of the business has probably eliminated almost every typical buyer for this business, and the fact that the business requires quite a bit of really specialized knowledge in order to be successful. I think most people would say, well, it's a lot of money to spend to know that I might walk in and have a few years of really difficult, learning curve in it.
Sure.
Which would eliminate, like most venture capitalists or people who come in and buy businesses typically to turn around and make them profitable and sell them. They would say, we don't know enough about that market, So I think even if I wanted to sell today, it'd be really hard to. And I think the more likely scenario is we just keep adding a good team around me so that if I didn't want to be as involved day to day, that I didn't have to be, but I still enjoy it. Like I gotta get up, and there's nothing I want to do more than go see what hatched last night, and checking things out and be involved.
No, I mean, it's weird. Obviously, when we came over in March last year, I remember walking down to the snake room with you at like 10:30 at night, and you were still pulling clutches and things like that. So I think people probably don't realize that excitement and that level of enthusiasm for it is still there, because it has turned into sort of this machine that keeps rolling along and innovating and creating at the top all the time, that maybe they think that the passion or the love for the industry isn't there as much.
Yeah, if you lose it, honestly, it's weird because you can't be successful if you care too much about success, right? And you can't. That's the weird thing about it. So I think if I was to lose my passion for it, then my team better have that passion, because otherwise we're going down. I mean, it requires that in this industry. So I feel like it, to such a large extent, you have to maintain that love. As soon as you make it about profit, and the profits slip, it's a strange thing, because so much of it is creativity. It's like an artist who doesn't love their work. Yeah. Right. Like, and they decide, well, we're just going to make expensive paintings. Like, people perceive that pretty soon, and the quality of the work starts to really slip, whether you want to or not. If your heart's not in it, it shows, and then therefore the product, declines.
So something else you also touched on earlier was how you could come into it and make it a quicker burner than what you did sort of 20 years ago. Do you still think it's a good investment as a industry? Do you still think there is room for sort of capitalist growth in there and things? Because obviously a lot of talk at the moment about the market being down and people selling collections and getting out as much as they can. Do you still think it's a good investment for people coming into the hobby now or coming into an industry now?
I think it potentially is. So the thing you have to define, I think, to answer that question is what's the goal of the person coming in? So because of the way how you ask your question, I'm going to assume the goal is to make it their full-time business.
Sure.
Okay. So, right. So I would think if that's not your goal, then the answer is yes, 1,000%, because you're going to get exactly as much out of it as you put in. You'll have fun, whatever, make your money back. Right. So if you're looking at it from starting it with the goal to make it your full-time job and hopefully have increasing levels of success, right? So it's not just a static thing where you barely make it or whatever. I think it's absolutely still doable. In fact, it probably is more doable right now than it was 2 years ago because of the amount of additional, how much less capital it takes to buy the same amount of animals right now because of this down market. Now, it's really hard to overcome the emotional side of feeling like you're buying into a business when things are not going great. Nobody wants to do that, which is why prices are so low, right? It's this weird cycle. But now is absolutely the time, if you were to look at it from a strategic point of view, now is absolutely the time to buy up as much of your future as you can at these lower prices before we hit some sort of uptick again that comes back. But the challenge with buying into any industry that has a lot of maturity, which is our business is now 25 years or so in, is you're competing with people who have up to 25 years worth of experience. You're competing with people who have a 25-year head start, on mutations and combos and stuff. And you're buying from those people. So, I never put that much money in, but I put so much sweat equity that it's accumulated to be a pretty big, behemoth now. So you're going to have to come in, and if you want to compete at that level, the amount of financial investment has got to be pretty high if I compare it to how it was at the beginning, I think. And you could do it the slow way, the sweat equity way. It's just you're delaying the profit for a while. So it's a complicated answer. That's all I'm saying. I think it's very, very doable. What I tell my Patreon a lot, talk about is they say, what does it take to be successful in this business? And the answer is very infuriating. The answer is you have to be the kind of person who would be successful at this business. Again, I didn't talk about what snakes to buy. I didn't talk about how much money to put in. All that's variable. All that can be a myriad of answers and still be the right answer. But the part that can't change is your ability to make good decisions over time, your ability to learn relatively quickly as you go and learn from mistakes, and your ability to kind of change yourself and your personality and everything that you need to be the kind of business owner who would not fail. And that's what we preach on the Patreon a lot. We talk about a lot of principles of, hey, here's the principles of how you make these decisions. We can't make the decisions for you. And even if we did, we might screw you up because it's possible that you have something inside you that's a unique talent that we don't want to put you on this railroad. You might be able to leverage your own ideas to much greater success. But here's the principles we look at. And 9 out of 10 businesses fail in the first 10 years, right? But you look at those 9 businesses that failed. They're probably in industries where success is perfectly possible, right? So you're saying it's not the business that failed. It was the running of the business that failed. It was potentially the business operator's incapability to navigate whatever issues that came up. If you look at the 10% of businesses that do succeed in the first 5 years, I would estimate that usually if you take that person who started that business, they could probably do it again and again because they're the kind of person who would succeed at starting businesses. So that tells you right there everything you need to know about starting a business. It's really about becoming the kind of person who would succeed, not which business you buy and the exact details of how you started.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting insight into sort of your business mind as well, because I think there's maybe been a preconceived recipe for success with particularly the snakes that you buy certain genes, spend a certain amount, and the success will just follow anyway, because that's what's popular and that's what people are wanting to buy, and that's where people are seeing the market heading. Whereas you could do that and have completely the wrong mindset behind running the business and still fail.
Right. Yeah, because people want to focus on the creation of the product, which is the details of buying the stock animals, buying the breeders and that sort of thing. That's the fun part that everybody likes to deal with, which is we're going to buy these animals and they're going to breed and then they're going to make this combo, which is worth this much money, right? That's how I started too. I wanted to buy a piebald male and 5 piebald females from Peter Call at $15,000 each. And the way I put up a little spreadsheet, and my horrible calculations, I calculated that I was going to make like $10 million in the first 10 years because and because all I was doing was I was just assuming this male was going to breed all 5 of these females and all of them were going to lay 8 eggs and all of the babies were worth $15,000 each. So where's the breakdown in that logic?
Yeah.
Breakdown. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea that females sometimes take years off. I had no idea that eggs go bad in the incubator. I had no idea that I made a mistake. I had no idea that animals depreciated, right? Or that someday in 10 years, the piebalds would not be as expensive as they are now. So I was missing all kinds of information, right? Because I didn't have any experience. So people focus on that initial calculation, just like I did, and they map it out and they think, oh, this is great. And then they get in and they start getting punched, right? Punched by bad clutches, females that don't eat, their incubator failed. And then maybe they get through all those hurdles and they find out that there's depreciation. And now the babies they hatched are worth maybe a third. I mean, that's kind of worst case scenario, half to a third of what they thought it would be. And so now, in order to make the same amount of money, they've got to sell 3 times as many snakes, right, or twice as many snakes. And so suddenly, their projections of what they're going to make is going down, and there's demoralization in knowing that you're not going to be a millionaire in 3 years. And then finding out again, even if you get to that point, you find out, okay, they're worth half as much. And also, I'm moving into a market where there's lots of other people who are making exactly the same snake. How do I stand out? And then suddenly, you're not dealing with producing a product anymore. You're in the business world, which is marketing, advertising, fulfillment, customer satisfaction, quality control. That's the world that you're living in, and that's where businesses succeed or fail. Not necessarily in the margins initially, because the margins are there in ball pythons for the most part. If you make any smart choices, the margins are there. But all those other aspects will just make or break you. And I mean, I told you, I've been through a couple of times where I thought about quitting early on. A lot of people get to very similar situations and they do quit.
Do you think that's what's causing the downturn in the market at the moment, is those people that have realized that the depreciation of animals that they probably bought mainly during COVID, when bumper prices were up, everyone was looking to buy and getting into it, and then they've realized they don't have the time or they're not getting the investment back that they thought. Do you reckon those are the ones now that the majority of them are chucking in the towel early?
Yeah, I think we went through a uniquely bad depreciation curve because of COVID, right? Normally, our business cycles, anyways, we've done quite a few videos about this and talking about this. There's just normal cycles where everybody gets a little too excited about it. There's too many snakes in the market. Everybody's overproducing. So many people got in, and the demand cannot match that supply. So therefore, depreciation starts to, prices start to fall, and people start to get a little disillusioned, and they stop breeding, and suddenly the demand typically stays about the same, but suddenly the supply, which was too high, is now plummeting, and suddenly everybody who is making snakes starts feeling really good about it again because they have no problem finding buyers, and the market heats back up, and the cycle repeats over and over. what was unique about the COVID thing was it got extra hot, way hotter than we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And you combine that with the fact that there were so many new people coming into the market that we essentially kind of skipped over one of our typical dips, and we just kept getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And then when the market did overheat and the demand actually plummeted because of inflation, everybody's cost of living was going up, and people were like, I don't need to be buying snakes right now. Those two things coincided perfectly, and it just created this perfect storm of these prices are falling back to reality, to where people actually want to buy in a non-hot market. And that's just really painful. It's painful, especially if you bought at the peak of that market. Now, if those people stayed in, I do believe absolutely they can make it. It's no issue, but they're going to have to hold really strong through a period of difficulty. I think we're also honestly coming out of it now. I think we're on the other side of it, but it's not going to necessarily feel really strong for a while as we move back up.
Absolutely. How has that affected Kinova in terms of sales and sort of production? I mean, I'm assuming that you're still producing just as many, or if not more, clutches than you was last year, the year before, etc. Was you hit hard by that sort of recession as well, or something that sort of always seems to happen with Kinova is you have that sort of just in effect where people want to buy animals from Kinova because they know that they're cutting edge, or
we're insulated from it to an extent. Whereas our demand stays strong because of our position in the industry. That's demand. However, we can't charge more for the same animals than everybody else. I mean, not significantly more. We can always be a little bit premium higher, but generally speaking, as prices drop and drop and drop and drop, we either stop selling snakes because we're way too expensive, or we have to kind of move with it and just kind of adjust with it. And so we sold marginally more snakes for less profit during this time, for sure, and it's a challenge to keep up with that. I think this year we actually are cutting production, not really on purpose, maybe by about a quarter, simply because we've gotten much more strict about, hey, there's not crazy demand out there, so we really only want to make the really nice snakes that we care about, the really special stuff, and we're going to not make so many that are more for the middle of the market or the bottom of the market, and just try to control the supply a little bit. But it's just ebb and flow,
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely say about being insulated from it with the higher end stuff. Do you feel like you've almost future-proofed yourself with the triple recessives, quad recessives and stuff, because people are still following, people are still trying to hit the Batmans or the Pompeys and things, and you're so far out there with triple recessives and quad recessives that you're almost going to never be caught as such, that you're constantly going to have that flow of animals that people are going to want to buy.
That's the goal, that's definitely the goal, is to always just keep thinking into the future and have things coming down the pipeline. So when they become, reasonable, or just kind of typical values that people like to buy, that you have enough of them, that's the thing. So, that's kind of our goal, is we're always trying to think to the future, not just about making things that are gene packed, but try to think too of new things that kind of re-energize people's interest in ball pythons. And that's the key, is to think of really good new combos and special things. And because we need that, this industry needs to constantly have a new sense of like, hey, we're not done yet. There's still cool stuff out there that we could discover. And without that, I think that also softens the market. People are looking at these snakes to buy them for what they will make, not for necessarily what they are at the time.
Yeah.
Right. That's a big part of our market. And so if there's a perception that all the best combos have already been made and everything from here on out is going to start looking the same or worse, I think that's going to erode our market a lot. And thankfully, I don't think we're there, anywhere near there.
So let's say three. What's three projects or combos that are sort of exciting you the most at the moment?
Honestly, I love all my projects the same almost. I always feel like just every year I'm just trying to make them a little bit better. What sticks out in my mind right now, I'm excited about puzzles right now, even though we have very few of them, and I don't know if we're gonna have any more this year. I'm just really excited about where they're headed. It's looking really good. The other thing is I really like the Anthony DG clown, which I see one on your slide there behind you.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
that's your one actually.
yeah, sweet. Yeah, I'm excited about that. Just putting some combos into it, making the Batman version, and it won't be this year, but maybe next year. Who knows? Excited about making some of those new combos. I just think that's a whole nother world that I get excited about the idea of exploring worlds of combos, and that's an untapped world right now, and so that really excites me. Once we start to really figure out, I get less and less interested in something, and I start to be like, I'm just not sure that this is going to get way better than it is, in certain combos, and I start looking for other things.
Yeah, I can understand that. So one of the other things we need to talk about is Clutch. Obviously, new to the market as of last year, maybe was it, or the year before?
Yeah.
What's next with Clutch, and what updates and what changes are coming to it?
Right. So we had a giant update in January where we complete overhaul of the system, which was for performance and redid the architecture and everything. It was a big improvement. It's really awesome. The users are loving it. And then actually I think just a week ago or so, we put out a brand new update with all new search functionality and a lot of user customization and stuff. Just like really make using it a great experience. Next thing, we have a whole timeline. We have the breeding planner that just came out. I don't know if you've messed with that yet. That is really cool, and we're just starting to refine it because it can get so much better, like where it's predictive analytics and making suggestions as far as what compatibility between your males and females and making good decisions. Of course, I think a lot of people know exactly what they want to do, and that's great. But our goal is for people who come in who maybe don't know everything, make better decisions than they would have initially while they're learning, and hopefully we can make the system smart enough to keep up with them, but hopefully they can also be smarter than the system pretty fast too.
Yeah, I've had a little play about with the breeding planner. I've had a Clutch account for ages, but never actually fully put it to use. So this season was the one where I was like, right, I'm going to make use of it, utilize what's on there, and really, I'm terrible at keeping records of things. I have to look back through pictures and try and find dates and things like that. So I made a conscious decision to really use it a lot more this year and actually make the most of it. And obviously, one of the things that you can do
the best time to do it is early, because your collection gets so big after a while, it gets really hard to get it in there. But if you let it grow with you, then it becomes something that's just a little bit of maintenance, versus constant, overall.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to add like 1,000 animals into it or something like that. That would be quite a daunting task.
Yeah.
So obviously, one of the things that you can do with Clutch is the genetic shed testing through RGI. Right. How important is that, and how much has that changed your breeding programs and plans over the years?
It's been huge for us. I think I have to check, but I think we're closing in on 2,000 shed tests now done from my collection alone. That's just from my collection. That's not including everybody else's going through Clutch and everything. And for me, it's been a really cool way. It's been obviously a big expense, but I haven't been able to run the numbers, exactly. Of course, it's hard to know, but I think it's been an expense that has paid off through increasing the value of some animals, right? And then some animals, you find out they're pos het, and they're not het, right? They don't prove to be het, and so you end up actually reducing the value of other animals, right? And you think, okay, well, that sounds like it's a wash. It's not a wash, because the way our pos hets work, usually they're weighted towards the customer, right? Not towards the breeder, right? So you actually gain more for every het that proves than you lose for every het that doesn't. And we found that if you take away the pos hets off an animal because it didn't prove, they actually sell faster, because a lot of people they feel like they're overpaying if there's something pos het for something they don't want. And so what you end up doing is you end up taking two animals that were pos het for something, one proves, is more expensive, but a customer is more likely to take the animal because they feel guaranteed. And then you have one animal that doesn't prove, and customers are more likely to take this animal because they didn't want that gene to start with. And you end up actually, both sides of inventory actually move faster than POS heads do. And so we found that just from that side, from the selling animal side, it made sense. And then from keeping animal side, we're able to keep a smaller number of animals to get the same effect. And so it allows us to shrink our collection, have a little bit more powerful, maybe add another project because we now have fewer animals in our current projects.
Yeah, I think what you said there about the possets is hitting the nail on the head, really. There's so many people that are, in this day and age, unwilling to take the chance on the possets. Maybe 5 years ago, possets were a lot more, a lot more readily bought because people couldn't afford the investment of getting into the visual, or they weren't really sure whether it was going to prove anyway. There was a lot of missold hets and stuff. So people buying the possets maybe take a chance on it, and if it proves out, it proves out. If not, would it massively affect your plans? Maybe you was going to create the double hets anyway, and it was going to maybe just fill that void, and then you end up with this animal that's come out that's proved anyway.
Right. No, it makes sense on so many levels. And also there's a part where too, where just knowing what's in your animals really helps you make better pairing decisions. Like I'm thinking on the codom world, there's a lot of animals are like, well, it's POS yellow belly, it's POS this, it's POS that. Well, knowing what it is will help you avoid an interaction that you are not wanting, right? You don't get ivories because now they're both parents are yellow belly where you weren't quite sure before, and whatever. There's a million little pairing decisions you make that actually knowing what's in your sire and dame helps a ton. And then when you go to identify later, actually knowing what's in your sire and dame really helps identify the babies. There's just so many levels of improvement that shed testing makes for your collection.
Yeah, I completely agree. So we're pushing on for about 50 minutes now. So I've got a few more questions before we wrap it up. So one of the questions that I ask every guest in this podcast is, you're having a dinner party. There is 4 guests, dead or alive, that you can choose. Who would they be and why?
Boy, who would they be? I'd probably just do some famous historical figures, like maybe have like Abraham Lincoln or Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Edison. These are all American, of course. You get Churchill. I'd probably just love to quiz some of those guys and just dig into their mentality and what drives them, and what that sort of thing. Or you go the opposite way and say like some of my passed on family members that I just miss, right? My grandparents and that sort of thing. Yeah, one of those 2 ways probably.
And what would you serve for starters, mains, and dessert?
Oh boy, I wouldn't even be picky about that. I'm not sure I'd eat. I just listen.
None of the sushi from Japan on your recent travels, then?
That was good. The nice thing about sushi is it's good to socialize over because it comes out slow and they're all bite size, and yeah,
that trip looked incredible as well. I was looking at some of the pictures and the videos, so it looks fantastic. How are you finding the sort of the emerging markets? Obviously, Japan's had a pretty strong market for a while now, but are you finding a lot more of the Korea and things like that the business is picking up over there while it's dropping down stateside?
Yeah, it has been. It's been picking up a lot in Asia, it seems like, for the last couple of years. And hopefully those markets continue to just grow and self-fulfill. And after a while, they start making the animals for themselves they need, and wish them the most success. It seems like markets kind of come and go as far as our perspective, as far as buying from us, because typically they kind of heat up. They buy a bunch of stock from us, from the US, because we have obviously more advanced stock typically. But then they start making their own, and they, become kind of an internal market for a while, and they may or may not start buying from us again at that point. But right now they've been, I think, ramping up with excitement and a lot of interest over there, and especially these better prices. I think people have been picking things up.
Yeah, for sure. So the last question that I'm going to ask you is left by the previous guest, and I don't know who they're asking it for. So the question that you have been left is, what question should I have asked you, but I haven't?
Wow. I don't know. What are we missing? What are we? You've asked very insightful questions. I think that normally I would have an answer to that, but I'm not sure I do. You've asked really good questions throughout.
You don't have to flatter me, Justin. It's fine.
Yeah, sorry. This is what I do when I don't know what to say. Yeah, I don't know. I think you've asked the right questions. I think it's we're all on this journey, and we don't know the future. So without knowing the future, it's hard to know what questions are pertinent for the
Okay, let's
future.
talk about one of your other pastimes. Then let's talk about the cars.
All right.
So
Yeah.
what's that? What's in the garage? I think last time we was there, you were still having the garage was being built. I don't know if it's completed yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in here now. Yeah.
Thought you
Looking
was.
down at the cars down below. Yeah. So right now, let's see, we have the race car, which most people have seen on Instagram. I'm able to take out pretty often. And then we have two classic Porsches down there right now, which is a 99 Carrera, which is really low miles, it's a really special spec. And then a 92 911 Turbo, which is my favorite. It's like the bad boys for life car, you know. Yeah. It's gorgeous. Then I have a red Corvette, C8 Corvette, which is kind of like just a daily, go on dates with the wife with. And then I have a GT3, a blue GT3, which is the 2022. It's just kind of like the supercar kind of the group, but I don't put that many miles on it. It's really just a driver's car. You don't want a daily. It's kind of uncomfortable. It's kind of race car, rough. But if you want to go and you want to have fun, like for the sake of driving, there's no better car than that one. It's just fast and loud and responsive and incredible.
Yeah. What's the one car that you want to add? What's the dream car?
So right now it's a 1980 Ferrari, and I'm working on getting one, and fingers crossed it'll happen. But it's a Ferrari 512 BB, and so it's the one I wanted as a kid. People would say, "Oh, it's a Magnum PI car." It's actually not. He was driving a 308, but it's a similar body style. It's just the more beefy version of the Magnum PI car from the 80s.
Sure. Well, I think that's a good note to round it up on. We're just coming up to an hour now. I don't want to take too much of your time, but thank you very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you on. And
thanks, Tom.
Yeah, no doubt we'll be able to do another one in the future.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Looking forward to connecting more, and hopefully I can come see you sometime here in the fall, maybe or next year.
Absolutely, that'd be fantastic. And quickly before we go, obviously I'm sure you don't need to, but where can people follow you and find you on social media?
Yeah, Kinova. You can spell it now. That's the great beautiful thing about Kinova.
It's there.
Written on Kinova Reptiles, and find us everywhere. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Justin, thank you very much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure. And I'm going to get a question from you off air for the next guest. Okay. So I'll give you a minute or so to think of that, and we'll get that done.
All right. Sounds good.
Lovely. Cheers, Justin. Thank you.
All right. See ya. Bye.
Bye-bye.
JVK Reptiles and Racks is proud sponsor of That Wolfie's Royal podcast show. Here at JVK we sell professional stainless steel hand-welded racks for ball pythons, leopard geckos, burms, boas and retics. We have recently introduced acrylic displays and are soon to come out with our own green tree python enclosures. We are also breeders of high-end designer morphs concentrating on recessive and codom genes such as clown, desert ghost, tornado, sunset and tri-stripe, and many other codoms to suit. If you'd like to get hold of us, we have a website, jvkreptilesandracks.co.uk. We are on most social media platforms such as Instagram and Facebook. We also have a page on Wolf Market.
Hey guys, it's Mark from MJ's Pythons, one of the co-founders of The Ark. The Ark is now a proud sponsor of That Wolfie Royals podcast. The Ark, which stands for Amphibian and Reptile Club, is a multi-species gathering of reptile enthusiasts in the south of England. We come together multiple times a year to share our passions and have a great time together. The ARC is an event focused on diversity and community, just like the Wolfies podcast. If you'd like to join the ARC and take part in our in-person event, head on over to the website at www.amphibianandreptileclub.co.uk and become a member today. For any other information around the ARC, please do also check out our website where we'll have past events, upcoming events, and all the information relevant to the ARC and its events posted on the website. Thank you for listening to this short advertisement and listening to this amazing podcast, and we hope to see you all at the next show.
Hi, it's Dan from World of Exotics. We're a specialist reptile shop based on the Wirral, proud to be sponsoring the Wolfies Royals podcast. If you're ever in the area and need any of your reptile supplies, we're always fully stocked with live food, frozen food and everything else you need for your animals. We always try to have a wide selection of different species in store with a good selection of royal pythons. We update our animal lists weekly on our website at worldofexotics.co.uk, and please check out our social media on both Facebook and Instagram at World of Exotics. Now back to the podcast.
Andrea Lupodini is one of the leading names for graphic designs and logos within the reptile industry. He produces high quality designs for some of the most recognisable names and faces within the hobby and the industry, and he has also designed my logos too. Branding and marketing are so important these days, and making sure you stand out from the madding crowd is difficult, or it was up until now. If you're looking for a new logo, or perhaps you just want to revamp your existing design, then look no further. Andrea will work closely with you to bring your ideas to life, and he can do so in a variety of different styles also. As well as logos, Andrea also designs eye-catching roller banners, social media banners and YouTube banners, to name but a few, and these will all give your pages a fantastic professional feel and edge. For a full range of products and services available, check out Andrea Lupodini Design on Instagram and Facebook, but please be sure to look out for that blue verification tick. This series, we're excited to bring you a unique podcast bundle to really up your game. Purchase a full logo design and receive 2 additional services free of charge. This could be a Facebook cover design, a table banner, a roller banner, stickers, t-shirts. There's nearly 20 extra services and products to choose from, so you can tailor the package to suit your exact needs. And the greatest thing about it is you'll even save yourself over €100 too. So, use the promo code Wolfie24 when inquiring with Andrea to activate your podcast pack savings today. Be sure to follow Andrea's social media pages for further fantastic offers, and check out all of his existing deals too. Thanks for listening. Now back to the podcast.